Greetings, JCUMC family. Pastor Brittany here, coming to you from my back deck this week, where I am enjoying a beautiful spring morning. I'm enjoying the gentle breeze. I'm enjoying the sound of the birds chirping. I'm enjoying seeing the new life that is being planted and emerging among my community. As I'm enjoying this time, I'm being reminded of the beauty and the newness and the hope that unfolds during the season of spring. Over the last few weeks, you'll recall that I've been journeying through the end of the Gospel of John, looking at the post-resurrection accounts of Jesus as told by the author of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, according to the author. But this week I found myself journeying backwards, going to the end of the Gospel of Luke, where we find Luke's account of that first Easter morning. Early in the day of the first day of the week, the women arrive at the tomb to find it empty, to only find the cloth. They ask two men, "Where have they taken him? What have they done with our Lord?" The response is, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen." And the women journey to find the disciples, and they share of what has taken place. They share of what they witnessed that morning. And then Peter runs to the tomb to find it exactly the way that the women had described. Later in the day, and this is the part of the story that I really want to focus on, but later in the day, we have Cleophas and an unknown disciple who are journeying down the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus. And as they're walking, they encounter a stranger. Now, the reader knows that the stranger is Jesus, but the disciples who are walking don't realize that it is him. And so the stranger asks, "What are you talking about?" Now, I kind of find it interesting that this stranger appears and just inserts himself into the conversation. But Cleophas and the unknown disciple decide to share, "Don't you know what is going on, what has happened over these last few days?" And then they recount the events that had transpired just days before. The three continue journeying toward Emmaus, and when they're getting closer, the stranger starts to walk in a different direction. And Cleophas and the other disciple call to him and they say, "Why don't you stay with us? It's getting late in the day. You can continue your journey tomorrow." So they enter the house and they begin to have a meal together, and then the stranger takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to the disciples. And it's in that moment that the disciples realize that it was Jesus who was among them the whole time. It took Jesus doing something that the disciples had witnessed to realize that it was Jesus who was present during that journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus. A consistent theme for me throughout these video devotions has been seeking the presence of Christ in the midst of the days where we find ourselves. And I think the reason that I continue to come back to that theme is because it's a message that I continue to pray about. It's a message that I continue to find myself needing a reminder of. And it's a message that during these times, I just need to be made aware of over and over again in different ways. As you may know, last week I did a written devotion because I suffered from a migraine and it kind of threw the rest of my week off. And I wasn't feeling all that well, as migraines often make you feel. And after that, I was struggling a bit to see and to encounter Christ in the midst of things. So when I was reading this story of Cleophas and the unknown disciple in their walk to Emmaus and not realizing who is among them until it is Jesus breaking bread with them, that I reminded myself that Christ is present, and that when I'm enjoying these signs of spring, that is Christ unfolding in front of us once more, that is Christ in hope and newness and joy that can still be found in the midst of these uncertain times. And I know it's a message that I've continued to pray about because it's a message that I've continued to need to hear from myself, and one that I feel is important to be reminding others of during this season. My sincerest prayer truly has been that you and your family are well, that you and your family are able to see Christ present in this time. I know that we have families who are grieving the loss of a loved one. We have families who know someone who is ill, who is suffering, who is hurting. We have people who are longing for the day when they can reconnect with one another to go see family, because they're not able to even do that during these days. We have people who are longing for the connection once more. And I can't speak for you in your quarantine days, but I can speak for me. And that this week was a harder week of quarantine for me. And so having this story of the disciples that needed the visual reminder and experience of Christ being among them, that's really speaking to me this week. It's this story that as I sit here and enjoy the gentle breeze and listen to the birds and see the blossoms of spring, that those can be reminders too. So may you find the reminders, the things that help you to recall exactly where Christ is present amongst us. Just as Christ breaking bread with the disciples was their reminder and awakening to the presence of Christ with